In the heart of a lush African savanna, where golden grass swayed under an endless blue sky, nestled a village called Elupoju. The village was a tapestry of earthen huts with thatched roofs, woven together by dusty paths and the laughter of children. On a particularly starry night, when the moon hung low and full, 2 baby boys were born. The first cry pierced the air just as the sun's earliest rays painted the horizon in shades of pink and orange. This child, born to the wealthy Adeyemi family, was named Ekinwell, meaning, the brave one has come home. Ekinwell's father, Chief Adeyemi, was the village's most prominent elder, known for his collection of colorful agbadas and his booming laugh that could be heard across the village square. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across Elupoju, another cry joined the village's morning chorus. This second boy, born to the humble Oladil family, was named Niyi, meaning child of honor. Niyi's parents were hard-working farmers, their hands calloused from tilling the earth and their faces creased with smile lines from years of finding joy in simple pleasures. The village buzzed with excitement, for it was rare for 2 boys to be born on the same day. The elders whispered that surely these children were destined for greatness, their fates intertwined like the roots of the ancient baobab tree that stood at the village center. As tradition dictated, on the 8th day after their birth, both families prepared to take their newborns to visit Baba Alagba, the village seer. The air was thick with anticipation as the families made their way to the outskirts of Elupoju, where Baba Alagba's hut stood apart, surrounded by a garden of mysterious herbs and flowers. Chief Adeyemi led his family, dressed in their finest clothes, golden jewelry glinting in the sunlight. Ekinwell, wrapped in a blanket of the softest cotton, slept peacefully in his mother's arms. The Oladil family followed close behind, their clothes simple but clean, with Niyi wide awake and curious in his father's gentle embrace. Baba Alagba emerged from his hut, his white hair a stark contrast to his dark skin, his eyes clouded with age but sharp with wisdom. He beckoned the families inside, where the air was heavy with the scent of incense and the walls were adorned with symbols and fetishes of ancient power. The old man first took Ekinwell in his arms, closing his eyes and swaying gently as he peered into the child's future. After what seemed like an eternity, his eyes snapped open. This child, he declared, his voice resonating with certainty, will rule and be known far and wide. Great power and riches await him, and his name will be on the lips of many. Chief Adeyemi's chest swelled with pride, and he exchanged a triumphant look with his wife. They had always known their son was destined for greatness, and now it had been confirmed by the revered seer. Then, Baba Alagba turned to Niyi, cradling the alert child in his wizened hands. Again, he closed his eyes, but this time his brow furrowed, and a small frown played on his lips. When he spoke, his voice was softer, tinged with what might have been a concern. This boy will be strong and kind, he said, his heart as vast as the savannah. But his path will be one of struggle and poverty. Niyi's mother, Aduk, clutched her husband's arm, her heart heavy with worry. She looked down at her son, who gazed back at her with eyes full of innocence and wonder, unaware of the weight that had just been placed upon his tiny shoulders. As the families left Baba Alagba's hut, the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. The Adeyemi family walked tall, their faces beaming with the promise of a bright future. The Oladil family moved slowly, their minds racing with concern for what lay ahead for their beloved son. As the boys grew from infants to toddlers, their lives began to take very different turns, shaped by their families' reactions to the prophecies. In the Adeyemi household, Ekinwell was treated like a little prince. His every whim was catered to, and he was showered with praise for even the smallest accomplishments. Look how quickly he learned to walk. Chief Adeyemi would boast to anyone who would listen. Surely, this is a sign of his future greatness. Ekinwell grew into a charming but somewhat spoiled child. He had a natural charisma that drew other children to him, but he also developed a habit of expecting others to do things for him. His parents, so certain of his destined greatness, rarely corrected his behavior or encouraged him to try things for himself. In contrast, the Oladil home was filled with love, but also with determination. Aduk, Niyi's mother, refused to accept that her son was fated for a life of poverty. "We may not be able to change the stars," she would say to her husband late at night, "but we can teach our son to reach for them." From an early age, Niyi was taught the value of hard work and kindness. Aduk would involve him in her daily chores, praising him for his efforts rather than his results. "See how you've helped Mama sweep the floor," she would say, even when more dirt had been spread than cleaned. "You have such a big heart, my little helper." Niyi's father, Bebatunde, would take the boy to the fields, letting him play in the dirt while he walked. "Look, Niyi," he would say, showing him a handful of seeds. "From these tiny things, with care and patience, we grow the food that feeds our village. Remember, my son, great things often have humble beginnings." As they grew, the differences between the two boys became more pronounced. Ekinwell, with his fine clothes and confident swagger, was often the center of attention. He had a quick wit and a mischievous streak that both amused and exasperated the village elders. However, he also developed a tendency to give up quickly when things didn't come easily to him, always expecting someone else to step in and fix his problems. Niyi, on the other hand, was quieter but no less loved by those who knew him well. He was often seen helping younger children learn to play games, or assisting the village elders with small tasks. When faced with challenges, Niyi would furrow his brow in concentration, trying again and again until he succeeded. One day, when the boys were about 5 years old, they were playing near the village well. Ekinwell, showing off as usual, tried to lift a bucket of water that was far too heavy for him. When he couldn't do it, he quickly lost interest, declaring the task beneath him. Niyi, seeing an old woman approach who needed water, didn't hesitate. He couldn't lift the full bucket either, but he figured out that by filling it only halfway, he could manage to carry it. It took him 4 trips back and forth, but he filled the old woman's pot, earning a warm smile and a pat on the head. This incident was a small preview of the way their different approaches to life would shape their futures. Ekinwell, always expecting success to fall into his lap, and Niyi, willing to work hard and find creative solutions to help others. As the boys reached school age, the entire village gathered for the ceremonial first day of lessons. The schoolhouse, a long building made of sun-baked mud bricks with a corrugated iron roof, stood at the edge of the village, surrounded by acacia trees that provided welcome shade during the hot afternoons. Ekinwell arrived in a new, creased school uniform, his hair neatly oiled and his shoes shining. He strutted into the classroom, chin held high, already acting as if he owned the place. Niyi's uniform was clean but well-worn, a hand-me-down from an older cousin. He entered the room with wide eyes, taking in every detail with curiosity and excitement. Their teacher, a stern but kind-hearted woman named Miss Amina, quickly discovered the challenges each boy would present. Ekinwell was bright and quick to answer questions, but he became frustrated easily when he didn't understand something immediately. He would often disrupt the class with jokes or mischief when lessons became difficult. Niyi, on the other hand, was a diligent student. He wasn't always the first to grasp new concepts, but his persistence was remarkable. Miss Amina noticed that he would stay after class, practicing his letters or sums until he got them right. She also observed that Niyi had a gift for explaining things to his classmates in a way they could understand, often helping those who were struggling. Despite their differences, Ekinwell and Niyi formed an unlikely friendship. They were often seen together during breaks, Ekinwell's boisterous laugh contrasting with Niyi's quieter demeanor. They would race through the village, playing elaborate games of make-believe where Ekinwell was always the chief or the hero, and Niyi was content to play supporting roles. One memorable adventure occurred when they were about 8 years old. Ekinwell had heard the adults talking about a leopard that had been spotted near the village. Always one for grand ideas, he convinced Niyi that they should go hunt the leopard themselves. "Think of how the village will cheer for us," Ekinwell exclaimed, his eyes shining with excitement. "We'll be heroes." Niyi was hesitant. "But Ekinwell, we're just children. The leopard could be dangerous." "Nonsense," Ekinwell declared. "I'm destined for greatness, remember. Nothing bad can happen to me, or to you, if you're with me." Reluctantly, Niyi agreed to go along, more to keep an eye on his friend than out of any belief in the plan. They snuck out of the village early one morning, armed with nothing more than sticks and their childhood bravado. As they ventured deeper into the bush, the sounds of the village faded away, replaced by the mysterious noises of the wild. Colorful birds called from the treetops, and unseen creatures rustled in the underbrush. Ekinwell marched forward confidently, waving his stick like a sword. Niyi followed more cautiously, his eyes darting around, alert for any sign of danger. Suddenly, they heard a low growl. Both boys froze. It wasn't the leopard, but an old baboon, his teeth bared in a threatening snarl. Ekinwell's confidence evaporated in an instant, and he turned to run. But Niyi, remembering something his father had taught him, stood his ground. He picked up a handful of pebbles and began to clack them together, making a loud, rhythmic noise. The baboon, startled by the strange sound, hesitated. Niyi backed away slowly, continuing the noise, pulling the paralyzed Ekinwell with him. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, they were far enough away to turn and run back to the village. When they finally stumbled back into Elupeju, out of breath and scratched by thorns, they found the whole village in an uproar, searching for them. Their parents' relief quickly turned to anger, and both boys faced punishment for their reckless adventure. This incident marked a subtle shift in their relationship. While Ekinwell was quick to boast about how he had saved them both, conveniently forgetting his moment of panic, Niyi knew the truth. He began to realize that Ekinwell's big talk didn't always translate to real courage or solutions when it mattered. As they grew older, their childhood adventures became less frequent, but the pattern continued. Ekinwell would dream up grand plans, fueled by his belief in his own destined greatness, while Niyi would quietly find practical ways to either achieve the goal or mitigate the damage when things went wrong. As Ekinwell and Niyi entered their teenage years, the differences in their personalities and life approaches became even more pronounced, and their once close friendship began to show signs of strain. Ekinwell, now 14, had grown into a handsome young man with a silver tongue. He was popular among his peers, always at the center of social gatherings, regaling everyone with grand tales of his future exploits. "When I'm the richest man in Nigeria," he would boast, "I buy cars for all of you." His natural charm and the lingering respect for his family status meant that he could often talk his way out of trouble, whether it was missed assignments or broken rules. However, Ekinwell's reliance on his prophesied destiny was beginning to hold him back. He rarely applied himself in school, assuming that his future success was guaranteed regardless of his efforts. When faced with challenges, he would often give up quickly, declaring, "This isn't important for my future anyway." Niyi, in contrast, was blossoming in unexpected ways. While still quiet and thoughtful, he had discovered a passion for learning that went beyond mere diligence. He devoured books on every subject he could get his hands on, from history and science to poetry and philosophy. His mind was like a sponge, absorbing knowledge and making connections that often surprised his teachers. Moreover, Niyi's kindness and work ethic had earned him the respect and affection of many in the village. He was often seen helping elderly neighbors with their chores, tutoring younger children, or assisting his parents in the fields. Despite the prophecy of poverty that hung over him, Niyi approached each day with optimism and determination. One pivotal moment came when the boys were 16. The school was hosting a competition to design a new irrigation system for the village farms. The winner would receive a scholarship to study at a prestigious school in the city. Ekinwell, assuming his clever words would be enough, threw together a flashy presentation full of grand claims but little substance. Niyi, on the other hand, spent weeks researching, consulting with farmers, and refining his design. He created a detailed plan that used locally available materials and took into account the specific needs of their village. When the results were announced, Niyi's practical and well-thought-out design won unanimously. The village erupted in cheers, with many saying they had always known Niyi was destined for great things. Ekinwell, for the first time, felt the sting of real failure and the fear that perhaps his prophesied greatness wasn't as certain as he had always believed. Instead of congratulating his friend, he stormed off, muttering about how the judges must have been bribed. This incident created a rift between the once close friends. Ekinwell, nursing his wounded pride, began to avoid Niyi. He threw himself into social activities, organizing parties and events where he could be the center of attention, trying to reassert his perceived superiority. Niyi, hurt by his friend's reaction but determined not to let it deter him, focused on preparing for his future studies. He spent more time with a small group of dedicated friends who shared his intellectual curiosity and desire to improve their community. As their final year of school approached, the paths of the two young men seemed to be diverging sharply. Ekinwell, still coasting on his family's reputation and the prophecy of his greatness, made few concrete plans for his future. Niyi, with his scholarship secured and a clear goal in mind, looked towards the horizon with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Yet, despite their differences, a bond remained between them, a shared history of childhood adventures and the unique connection of having been born on the same day under the same prophecy. Little did they know that their greatest challenges, and the true test of their characters, still lay ahead. As the time came for Niyi to leave for his studies in the city, the entire village of Elupoju gathered to bid him farewell. There was a palpable sense of pride mixed with sadness, pride in the young man who had achieved so much despite the prophecy of poverty, and sadness at seeing one of their own leave the nest. Niyi's parents, Aduk and Babatunde, stood at the forefront of the crowd, their eyes glistening with unshed tears of joy and worry. They had worked tirelessly to support their son's dreams, often going without so that Niyi could have the books and supplies he needed. Now, seeing him off to pursue higher education, they felt a mixture of pride and trepidation. Niyi, dressed in his best clothes and carrying a small bag of belongings, hugged his parents tightly. "I will make you proud," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You already have, my son," Babatunde replied, patting Niyi's back. As Niyi made his way through the crowd, accepting good wishes and blessings, he searched for one face in particular. Finally, he spotted Ekinwell at the back of the gathering, leaning against a tree with an unreadable expression. Niyi approached his childhood friend, extending his hand. "Ekinwell, I hope we can part as friends." Ekinwell hesitated for a moment, pride warring with the affection of years of friendship. Finally, he grasped Niyi's hand. "Good luck in the city," he said, his tone a mix of sincerity and something harder to define, perhaps envy, perhaps regret. As Niyi boarded the bus that would take him to his new life, he took one last look at his village, at the faces of those he loved, at the only world he had ever known. The bus lurched forward, and Elupoju began to recede into the distance. Meanwhile, Ekinwell watched the bus disappear down the dusty road, a storm of emotions brewing within him. For the first time, he felt a gnawing doubt about his future. He had always assumed his prophesied greatness would simply happen, that he needn't strive for it. But seeing Niyi's departure, the result of hard work and determination, made him question everything. In the days that followed, a restlessness grew in Ekinwell. He began to feel trapped in Elupoju, a big fish in an increasingly small pond. The admiration he had always enjoyed from his peers now felt hollow, and he longed for something more. One evening, as the sun set over the savannah, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Ekinwell made a decision. He would go to the city too. Not to study, for he still believed that unnecessary for someone destined for greatness, but to seek his fortune and prove that the prophecy about him was true. His announcement caused quite a stir in the village. Chief Adeyemi, confident in his son's destiny, gave his blessing along with a generous amount of money. Ekinwell's mother, however, was more hesitant. "The city is not like our village," she warned. "Be careful, my son." But Ekinwell was too excited to heed her concerns. He packed his finest clothes, said his goodbyes, and set off for the city, certain that fame and fortune awaited him there. The city was a shock to both young men, albeit in different ways. Niyi found himself overwhelmed by the pace and scale of urban life. The towering buildings, the constant noise, the sea of unfamiliar faces, it was all so different from the close-knit community of Elupoju. However, his natural adaptability served him well. He threw himself into his studies, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. Though he sometimes felt homesick, he never lost sight of his goals. His kind nature and willingness to help others quickly earned him friends among his fellow students. He joined study groups, volunteered at local community centers, and even found time to work part-time at the university library to ease the financial burden on his family. Ekinwell's experience of the city was quite different. He arrived full of confidence, certain that his charm and the prophecy of his greatness would open doors for him. At first, things seemed to go well. His outgoing nature and good looks attracted attention, and he quickly fell in with a crowd of young, wealthy urbanites. He spent his days in cafes and clubs, regaling his new friends with tales of his destined greatness. His nights were a blur of parties and expensive outings. Ekinwell was certain that any day now, an opportunity would present itself, a business tycoon would recognize his potential, or he'd stumble upon some lucrative venture. But as weeks turned into months, Ekinwell's funds began to dwindle. His new friends, initially charmed by his stories and free-spending ways, started to drift away as he could no longer keep up with their lifestyle. The prophecy that had always been his comfort began to feel like a burden. One particularly low evening, as Ekinwell sat alone in his now shabby apartment, he thought of Niyi. He wondered how his childhood friend was faring in this big, unforgiving city. For a moment, he considered reaching out, but pride held him back. He was destined for greatness, after all. He couldn't let Niyi see him like this. Little did Ekinwell know that at that very moment, Niyi was thinking of him too. Niyi had heard through the village grapevine that Ekinwell had come to the city. He had tried to find him, wanting to reconnect, but the city was vast, and Ekinwell seemed to have vanished into its depths. As their first year in the city drew to a close, the two young men's paths could not have been more different. Niyi was striving in his studies, his hard work paying off as he earned top marks and the respect of his professors. He had even started to develop ideas for improving farming techniques back home, dreaming of ways he could use his education to benefit Elupoju. Ekinwell, on the other hand, was struggling. His money was almost gone, and his dreams of easy success had turned to dust. He found himself taking odd jobs just to make ends meet, each day a harsh reminder that the world didn't seem to care about the prophecy that had shaped his entire life. As the rainy season approached, bringing with it grey skies and a dampness that seeped into bones and buildings alike, both Niyi and Ekinwell faced challenges that would test their character and force them to confront the true meaning of destiny. The rainy season hit the city hard that year. Streets turned into rivers, and the constant drumming of rain on tin roofs became the soundtrack of daily life. For Niyi and Ekinwell, this season brought challenges that would shape their futures in unexpected ways. Niyi, now in his second year of studies, was thriving academically. However, the financial strain of city life was taking its toll. His part-time job at the library wasn't enough to cover his expenses, and he was reluctant to ask his parents for more help, knowing how much they had already sacrificed. One particularly stormy night, as Niyi was walking home from a late study session, he heard a commotion in an alleyway. Peering through the rain, he saw an elderly woman struggling with a broken umbrella, her groceries scattered on the flooded street. Without hesitation, Niyi rushed to help her, getting soaked to the skin in the process. The woman, touched by his kindness, asked for his name. Niyi Oladil, he replied, helping her gather the last of her belongings. Oladil, she repeated, a spark of recognition in her eyes. I knew Oladil once, many years ago. A kind man, just like you. As they parted ways, the woman pressed a small, wrapped package into Niyi's hands. For your trouble, she said with a smile, before disappearing into the rainy night. When Niyi unwrapped the package later in his tiny dormitory room, he found a beautiful, intricately carved wooden box. Inside was a note, to the kind young man who helped an old woman in the rain. May your generosity always be rewarded. If you ever need help, seek out Mama Ayabo in the old market. Niyi tucked the note away, touched by the gesture but not thinking much more of it. Little did he know how important this chance encounter would prove to be. Meanwhile, Ekinwell's fortunes had gone from bad to worse. He had lost his last odd job, and his landlord was threatening to evict him. Desperate and hungry, he found himself wandering the rain-soaked streets, the prophecy of his greatness now feeling like a cruel joke. As he passed by a busy marketplace, a commotion caught his attention. A group of men were roughing up an old woman, trying to steal her bag. Without thinking, Ekinwell rushed in, his years of playing the hero in childhood games taking over. He managed to fight off the attackers, taking a few blows in the process. The old woman, catching her breath, looked at Ekinwell with keen eyes. "What's your name, brave young man?" she asked. Ekinwell, he replied, wincing as he touched a bruise forming on his cheek. Ekinwell Adeyemi. The woman's eyes widened slightly at the name. Adeyemi, from Elupoju village. When Ekinwell nodded, she smiled. Well, Ekinwell Adeyemi, it seems fate has brought us together. I am Mama Ayabo, and I think perhaps we can help each other. Ekinwell, soaked and sore but intrigued, followed Mama Ayabo to her small shop in the heart of the old market. As they talked over steaming cups of tea, Ekinwell found himself pouring out his story, the prophecy, his expectations of greatness, and his current struggles. Mama Ayabo listened patiently, her wise eyes seeming to see right through him. When he finished, she spoke softly but firmly. Young man, prophecies are tricky things. They show a possibility, not a certainty. Your destiny is not something that happens to you, but something you create with every choice you make. Her words struck Ekinwell like a thunderbolt. For the first time, he began to consider that perhaps he had misunderstood the prophecy all along. Mama Ayabo offered Ekinwell a job in her shop and a small room to live in. It's not the greatness you imagined, she said, but it's a chance to rebuild, to find your own path. Ekinwell, humbled by his experiences and touched by the old woman's kindness, accepted gratefully. As he settled into his new role, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. No longer was he passively waiting for greatness to find him, now, he was taking the first steps towards creating his own destiny. As the rainy season continued, Niyi and Ekinwell, unknown to each other, were both beginning new chapters in their lives. Their paths, which had diverged so sharply, were slowly beginning to curve back towards each other, guided by the unseen hand of fate and the kindness of a wise old woman. Months passed, and the rainy season gave way to the dry heat of summer. Niyi, now in his final year of studies, was busier than ever. His innovative ideas for sustainable farming practices had caught the attention of his professors, and he was working on a final project that he hoped would benefit not just Elupoju, but rural communities across the country. However, the financial strain had only grown worse. His part-time job wasn't enough, and he was skipping meals to make ends meet. Remembering the note from the kind old woman, Nii decided to seek out Mama Ayabo in the old market. As he wandered through the bustling stalls, the aroma of spices and the chatter of hagglers filling the air, Nii finally came across a small, unassuming shop. A hand-painted sign read, "Mama Ayabo's Herbs and Remedies." Taking a deep breath, Nii stepped inside. The shop was cool and dim, shelves lined with jars of mysterious powders and bundles of dried herbs. Behind the counter stood an old woman with kind eyes and a knowing smile. "Oh," she said, "the kind young man from the rainy night. I've been expecting you, Nii Oladia." Nii was taken aback. "How did you know my name?" Mama Ayabo's eyes twinkled. "I know many things, young man. I know of the prophecy given on the day of your birth, and I know of your friend, born on the same day." Nii's heart raced. "Ekinwell. You know Ekinwell. Is he here in the city?" Before Mama Ayabo could answer, the beaded curtain behind the counter parted, and a familiar figure stepped through. Nii's jaw dropped. Ekinwell. Ekinwell, carrying a crate of supplies, nearly dropped it in shock. "Nii, what are you doing here?" The two young men stared at each other, years of separation and unspoken words hanging between them. Ekinwell looked different. Gone was the flashy clothing and cocky demeanor. He seemed older, more grounded, his hands calloused from honest work. Mama Ayabo chuckled softly. "It seems the time has come for truths to be revealed and old friendships to be renewed." She gestured for them to sit at a small table in the corner of the shop. "There is much to discuss." Over cups of fragrant herbal tea, Nii and Ekinwell began to share their stories. Nii spoke of his studies, his dreams of helping their village, and his current financial struggles. Ekinwell, with humility that would have been unthinkable in his younger days, recounted his fall from grace and the valuable lessons he had learned working for Mama Ayabo. As they talked, Mama Ayabo listened quietly, a small smile playing on her lips. When they finished, she spoke. "You two were born under the same stars, given prophecies that seemed to set you on different paths. But fate, it seems, had other plans." She turned to Ekinwell. "You, my boy, were told you would be great and powerful. But true greatness comes not from prophecies, but from the choices we make and the way we treat others." Then, addressing Nii, she continued, "And you, kind one, were foretold a life of poverty. But riches come in many forms, and the wealth of knowledge and compassion you have gained is worth more than all the gold in the world." The old woman's eyes seemed to glow with an inner light as she spoke her next words. "The truth is, my children, that your destinies were always intertwined. The greatness foretold for one and the struggle prophesied for the other were never meant for you alone, but for you to face together." Nii and Ekinwell exchanged glances, years of misunderstanding and separation melting away as they began to understand the true meaning of the prophecies that had shaped their lives. Mama Ayabo smiled, seeing the dawning realization on their faces. "Now," she said, her voice filled with warmth and wisdom, "it is time for you both to return to Elupoju. Your village needs you, and together, you have the power to bring about great change." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Nii and Ekinwell stepped out of Mama Ayabo's shop, their hearts full of newfound understanding and rekindled friendship. They had entered as two individuals, weighed down by the expectation of prophecy. They left as partners, ready to forge their own destiny together. The journey that lay ahead would not be easy, but with their combined strengths, Nii's knowledge and compassion, Ekinwell's charm and newfound humility, they felt ready to face whatever challenges awaited them in Ilupoju. As they walked side by side through the bustling market, planning their return home, neither of them noticed the shimmer of magic that seemed to follow in their wake, or the satisfied smile of an old woman watching from the shadows of her shop, her task finally complete. The bus rattled along the dusty road, carrying Nii and Ekinwell back to Elopoju. Both young men sat in silence, lost in thought as the familiar landscape of their childhood came into view. The baobab trees, the rolling hills, the patchwork of small farms, it all seemed smaller somehow, yet no less beautiful. As the bus pulled into the village, a crowd began to gather. Word of their return had spread quickly, and it seemed the entire village had turned out to greet them. Nii spotted his parents, Aduk and Babatunde, their faces etched with pride and joy. Ekinwell saw his father, Chief Adeyemi, standing tall but with a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. The two friends stepped off the bus together, and a hush fell over the crowd. For a moment, it was as if the whole village held its breath. Unsure to Elopoju, the two friends stepped off the bus together, and a hush fell over the crowd. For a moment, it was as if the whole village held its breath, unsure of what to expect from these two young men who had left as boys and returned as men. Nii was the first to move, rushing to embrace his parents. Tears flowed freely as Aduk and Babatunde held their son close, marveling at the confident, educated man he had become. Ekinwell approached his father more slowly, the weight of unmet expectations heavy on his shoulders. Chief Adeyemi looked at his son, taking in the changes, the humbler clothing, the calloused hands, the quiet strength in his eyes. For a moment, disappointment flickered across the chief's face, but it was quickly replaced by something else, understanding, and a grudging respect. "Welcome home, my son," Chief Adeyemi said, pulling Ekinwell into a warm embrace. As the initial emotions of reunion settled, curiosity took over. The villagers crowded around, eager to hear about their adventures in the big city. Ekinwell, once the boastful center of attention, now deferred to Nii, encouraging his friend to share his accomplishments. Nii spoke of his studies, his ideas for improving farming techniques, and his dreams of bringing prosperity to Elopoju. The villagers listened in awe, many nodding in approval at the practical wisdom in his words. When it was Ekinwell's turn to speak, he surprised everyone with his humility. He spoke of his struggles, the lessons he had learned, and the wisdom he had gained from Mama Ayabo. "I left here believing I was destined for greatness," he said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "I've returned knowing that true greatness lies not in wealth or power, but in how we treat each other and the contributions we make to our community." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Even those who had been skeptical of Ekinwell's change were won over by his sincerity. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the village square, Nii and Ekinwell stood side by side, addressing their community. They spoke of their plans, Nii's innovations in farming, Ekinwell's ideas for attracting sustainable development to the village. They talked about combining their strengths, working together to bring positive change to Elopoju. The villagers listened, hope kindling in their eyes. They saw before them not the fulfillment of two separate prophecies, but the birth of a new future for their community. In the days and weeks that followed, Nii and Ekinwell threw themselves into their work. Nii introduced new farming techniques, teaching the villagers about crop rotation, water conservation, and organic pest control. Ekinwell, drawing on the networking skills he had honed in the city, reached out to government officials and NGOs, securing funding and support for their projects. The village began to transform. New wells were dug, providing clean water year-round. A small clinic was established, with regular visits from doctors in the city. The school was expanded, with a new library stocked with books donated by Nii's university friends. Through it all, Nii and Ekinwell worked side by side, their childhood friendship deepened by shared purpose and mutual respect. The villagers watched in amazement as the two young men, once seen as opposites, proved to be two halves of a greater whole. One evening, as Nii and Ekinwell sat beneath the old baobab tree, watching the sun set over their thriving village, Ekinwell turned to his friend. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about those prophecies given on the day we were born." Nii nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. What about them? Well, Ekinwell continued, I always thought my prophecy of greatness meant I was destined for personal power and wealth. And yours, we all assumed it meant a life of hardship. But look at us now, Nii said, gesturing to the village spread out before them. Working together, we've brought a kind of greatness to Elupeju. And while we are not rich in money, we are rich in so many other ways, Ekinwell finished. In friendship, in purpose, in the joy of seeing our home thrive. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. Do you think, Nii said finally, that this is what the prophecies meant all along? That we were always meant to come together like this? Ekinwell chuckled. Who knows? Maybe Mama Ayabo was right. Maybe our destinies were always intertwined, and we just needed to figure that out for ourselves. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant golds and purples, the two friends sat together, at peace with their past and excited for the future they were building. In the village below, lights began to twinkle in the windows of homes, a testament to the prosperity and hope that had taken root in Elupeju. And so, the story of Nii and Ekinwell, the two boys born under the same stars but given very different prophecies, came to a new beginning. Their tale would be told for generations in Elupeju and beyond, a story of friendship, of personal growth, and of the power of choosing one's own destiny. For in the end, they had learned the greatest lesson of all, that true greatness comes not from the circumstances of one's birth or the predictions of others, but from the choices we make, the friendships we nurture, and the good we do in the world. As night fell over Elupeju, the village slept peacefully, its future bright with promise. And somewhere, perhaps, an old woman named Mama Ayabo smiled, knowing that her part in this tale was complete, and that the true magic had always resided within the hearts of two young men who had found their way home.